Warning: some viewers may find the following content highly disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. r/AskReddit. People who take walks at night. What's the scariest thing you've seen? I've never been afraid of the dark. Grew up in the countryside, where the nearest streetlight was 10 miles away, so I'm comfortable in dark places. So much so that I often take my dog for a walk at around midnight just because I like the peace and quiet of the night. I live in a city now, so something about the dark is just soothing to me. That being said, one of the scariest things I've ever experienced, I genuinely have no explanation for. Living in a city, I used to drive out 20-30 miles into the country to do some astrophotography. As I'm driving out one night, I see this guy walking at the side of the road with no lights, reflectors and a big backpack. Didn't think much of it other than it being a little odd. 5 miles later, I see the same guy walking again. I haven't changed directions, turned, and I've been doing 50 miles per hour. As I drove past, he looked and waved at me. I was pretty spooked, but I drove on. I must be imagining things. It can't be the same guy. I get to my field in the middle of nowhere, park up and get the camera out, and turn off all the lights so my eyes adjust to the dark. All is going well, and for 30 minutes I'm content, and starting to relax. Suddenly I hear a rustling near the hedge by the road, crunching leaves, grass being kicked. It was footsteps. I immediately get a feeling of dread, like I'm in severe danger and something bad was going to happen. I grab my camera, toss it in the car, get in, lock the doors and turn on the headlights. When I turn out of the field, I pass where I heard the noise and saw fresh footprints in the mud but no sign of anyone. I race back home, driving double the speed limit, constantly checking my mirrors for anyone. I park up around the corner and wait in the car with the lights off for 30 minutes, watching. Nothing shows up. I get home, lock all the doors and sleep with a knife under my pillow that night. I honestly don't know what really happened that night, but part of me knows that creepy guy I passed on the road twice was in that field. Over 25 years ago, I was walking in a park at night. It was pitch black in this park. No lighting, other than the moon and the stars on a beautiful autumn night. I couldn't see very well, but I knew the area, and was walking along the road, which ran parallel to a small river. The moonlight would bounce off the water, and all you would hear is the trickle from the slow running river and slight breeze in the trees. I loved those walks. That was until the one night, in the dead silence and pitch black, I distinctly hear a man's voice out of the woods say very clearly, "Young girls shouldn't go walking alone in the woods at night." I froze. I looked in the direction of the voice and couldn't see a damn thing. I ran home. That was the last evening walk I took in that park. Many years ago, my boyfriend and I decided to take a late night walk around his generally safe neighborhood. We got a few steps past the driveway when a shirtless guy came running over with a hammer in one hand and a machete in the other. My boyfriend stayed super calm and asked the man what was going on. Apparently, some man had just broken into his apartment and tried to kidnap his young daughter. So he was chasing him down to either shatter his fingers with the hammer or chop off his hands entirely with the machete. And he thought my boyfriend was possibly this man. My boyfriend gave me his car keys and told me to take myself home. We lived apart at the time, so I went and got his car, and by the time I was backing out of the driveway, the man was screaming at my boyfriend, who was just standing there calmly with his hands in the air. I drove a block away so the man wouldn't see me, rolled the windows down to try to hear what was happening, and called the cops. The machete man ended up running off, and I don't know if they ever got him. My boyfriend was fine though, thank God. Edit typo. During winter in a rural no cell service kind of area, completely dark, no street lights nor anyone in sight. Temperatures were around 20 and it was snowing. I was walking my dog with a flashlight. Then I heard someone start screaming bloody murder. Flight or fight kicked in. It truly sounded like someone was being stabbed to death for what seemed like forever. I chose to find out what the hell was going on. What I found instead was beyond anything I expected. He was a 5-year-old boy wandering down the road all alone. All he was wearing were light flannel pants and a thin t-shirt, no shoes or hat, and screaming so loudly it echoed through the hills. I dropped my dog's leash and walked up to him slowly, gently and repeatedly telling him that I'm a mom and that he's going to be okay. I wrapped him into my arms and carried him to a neighbor's home to warm him by the fire and call for help. Edit. The boy's parents were visiting friends. The boy got up at night to look for his parents, who left him and his sister home while they were out drinking. He got lost in the dark and just kept walking and screaming. Originally thinking I'd get in the crushes or witness some bloody domestic fight is what put my mind in the scared shitless headspace. Plus dark, no cell phones, no weapon. One time I turned around to see what was behind me just out of intuition, and I saw someone step behind a tree rather quickly and try to hide from me. I stood there for a second to confirm this, then I speed walked home ducking creepy. Speed walked, I would have Usain bolted out of there. This tiny story is somehow the creepiest I've read in this thread. Even if the person had stepped out and followed OP home, I would be getting less sinister vibes than I am from the image of them silently slipping back and resuming their watching. Gives me the shivers. Walking home from a late night gym session at 24 Hours Fitness, a white van passed by me, slowing down, slowly took a right turn in front of me. A couple minutes later I reach the turn and see the van stopped at the exit of a parking lot. It's facing back my way. It's like 4 AM and nothing else is going on and I'm creeped out. The van starts coasting forward slowly after I make the turn and I sprint across the street to a gas station and into this small dead-end water air pump station and press my body against an area of the wall that the van can't quite see me. It literally pulls into the air water station and stops. I hear the engine running right ducking next to me, but they never get out of the van. I just stand there pressed against the wall until they pull out and drive around the gas station into the lot on the opposite side of the wall. I hear the van lingering for some time before it goes silent. Still I wait a while longer before I leave and run the rest of the way home. I'm an overnight security guard. One night I was watching cameras and saw someone underneath a grass tarp where some landscaping was taking place on our property. I was guessing this person had probably tried to stash something before they went into detox, which is next door to our property. I get over to the tarp and don't see the guy anywhere. So I start walking over the tarp and lifting it to look for any stashed items. Well, I ended up stepping on the poor homeless guy. Scared the shit out of me. He was cool though and we fist bumped and he went on his way. I worked night shift for 7 years. One night a young, thin blonde woman was walking down the street at 2 AM with no pants or underwear on and a button-up shirt open. I tried to ask if she needed help and she just stared forward, slowly walking, staring forward. I called the police and they came and stood in front of her and she slowly walked into the cop's hand and stopped. I didn't stay and went back to work. I still think about her and what the duck was going on. I tell myself it was sleepwalking on Ambien or something, and that she wasn't just assaulted and in complete shock. I'll never know. But she was very pretty, and seemed well groomed. Was very strange. My old man casually walked across the lobby of a 5-star hotel naked as a jaybird on Ambien. Ha. My dad sleepwalked out of the hotel and came to in his tighty whities, hiding behind the ice machine like a gremlin, scaring the shit out of other guests. Of course he didn't have his room key, so he had to go down to the front desk and basically let them know he had sleepwalked and locked himself out. The clerk was apparently quite nervous when he approached, presumably because at least one guest had already let him know about the delirious ice machine man. Dead body on the side of the street with a sign around its neck saying "I'm a cell phone thief. Don't be like me." This was maybe 20 years ago in Manila, Philippines. Happened to my grandfather too. He was walking our dog at 5 AM. Dog went to do his business near a dark, grassy empty lot and they found a dead body bound up with a sign on him saying he was a thief. This practice is called salvage in the Philippines. Basically an extrajudicial killing done by policemen or vigilantes on criminals and drug addicts, or suspected criminals. It's basically been going on way before Duterte took office, but it's only with him it was somewhat institutionalized and blatant. Before that, the police didn't brandish it with so much impunity, and didn't dare target teens or grandmothers. Nowadays most of the poor are fair game. If you have money and connections you can still buy your way out of things. Almost 100% sure I witnessed a kidnapping. I was going to get my mail late at night while living in an apartment complex, and on the way back I noticed a woman in her pajamas surrounded by a few men right by a car. There was an argument and looked like they forced her in the car and drove off. I found her slipper nearby on the grass. I of course called the police and they came and I let them know what I saw, but I never found out what actually happened. Similar experience here. In high school, late at night walking home from a friend's house maybe a mile away. Halfway car comes cruising super slowly down the street. I hear someone screaming in the car. I was sure they were calling for help. I start following the car, and as I get on the phone with the cops the car starts pumping the gas, so I just run after them and try to follow them. But I lost them pretty quickly. Never learned what really happened. I hate the lack of resolution, like I wanna know if this person ended up okay or not. I still think about it and worry about what happened. I just always remember finding that slipper and chills going down my spine. Was up on a hill in the countryside at midnight when a man with a rifle came out of nowhere, ran right past me, and wasn't seen again. I went home shortly after that. Damn, these Civil War ghosts always running around. What I thought was a body in the woods. And after a bit of back and forth on the phone with the police, I returned with a few helpful coppers to find a slightly miffed drunk person who'd had an argument with his missus. What was there to go back and forth about? Body in the woods isn't emergency enough? Are you sure that's not just a drunk person who'd had an argument with his missus? Was out for a late walk in the rain. Always enjoy it because it's peaceful, smells great, quiet and never see anyone. Walked off this trail back into the road and saw a big pile of garbage under a tarp at the end of the cul-de-sac the trail ends in. Got a creepy chill like that could be a dead body or something, and I'd never know, just got a weird feeling that snapped me out of my calm walk. Picked up the pace. About 500 yards away, parked car with a guy sitting there, in the dark, in the rain, like 11-ish, car off, just sitting there. Got super creeped out at this point and changed my route back to the main road and hurried home. Turns out it was a dead body someone had dumped under that tarp. Was under there for 4 days before someone investigated it. The guy in the car turned out to be just a random dude. Guy lives there and totally unrelated to the body. Still, took a few months off from my late night walks alone in the woods. More backpacking than a walk, but this ducking terrifies me to this day. Our planned camping spot for the night was full. We'd backpacked all day to get to that location and there wasn't anywhere close to set up our tents. We called our guy on the outside to come pick us up as it was getting late. We didn't have anywhere to set up camp, and a storm was approaching. We hiked to the nearest exit point on the trail, met our pickup guy, and he drove us a few miles to the nearest campsite. We were familiar with that. We could basically drive up to long logging path pretty deep in the mountains that we had hiked to in previous years, so we were kinda familiar with the area. Anyways, we hop out of the van and it's pitch black out, no moon. It's April in the mountains and still pretty chilly. We're cold, hungry, and exhausted. That's when we notice this mother ducker staring at us from behind a tree. I know this sounds like a no-lab story, but it's 100% true and probably the most scared I've ever been. We notice this guy, no headlamp, no equipment, no backpack, just standing there. One of our group, former Marine, yells at him to come out and explain what his deal is. This guy walks a few feet out from behind the tree and we all shine our lights on him. And I shit you not, this dude's white t-shirt is covered in what looks like blood smears. He's pretty rough looking, long hair, long beard, crazy eyes, and he was wearing a bloody t-shirt and shorts in 35-degree weather at night. We're all pretty freaked out, and this is a pretty experienced group of hikers who've seen some shit. We ask this guy what his deal is and he says we can't camp here. We tell him that that's exactly what we plan to do, and he says I don't think that's a good idea for any of you. We kind of turn to discuss as a group, and when we look back he's hidden back behind the tree. As a group we basically decided none of us were getting any sleep that night if we stayed here, so we packed up the van and left. As we were pulling out, this guy pulled out one of those red filtered flashlights and ran after our van. I'm not kidding. He followed us for at least a quarter mile on foot. He was fast as duck. We passed a park ranger on the road and flagged him down to tell him how weird that dude was acting, and he said he'd go investigate. I didn't hear anything about it again for 5 years. For the longest time I thought he was probably some pot farmer who had a nearby plot, or a moonshiner who was just living in the woods and didn't want us near his still. People hunt all the time out there, which would maybe explain the blood a little bit. But I was recently at an event with some of those guys again for the first time in years, and that creepy dude from the woods got brought up. One of them who still lives nearby broke out his phone and said, "I forgot to tell you guys. I saw him again." Pulls up a news article and there he was. So obviously the same guy he'd been arrested for murdering some poor girl on the trail. Timelines didn't match up, so I fully believe we saw this guy shortly after he'd murdered someone else. He hasn't been charged with anything else as far as I'm aware. I'm not backpacking without a gun anymore. One of my old professors was a Florida wildlife officer. He would oftentimes be the only officer within a 10-15 mile radius in the middle of the Everglades. He had some wild stories of shit that he seen, but the one that stuck out to me the most was when he told us about a time that he saw a truck on a road where it shouldn't have been and let the guy off with a warning. He was somewhat new to the force and decided that he didn't want to harass some guy fishing, so he let him go. A few hours later he saw the naked body of a woman in her early 20s further down the road. He contacted state county law enforcement with a description of the guy and the tag numbers. The vehicle was found in Orlando months later abandoned, and the owner was the dead lady they found in the Everglades. They never caught the guy driving the truck. The truck had not been reported as stolen and the lady was not reported as missing. He said he felt an immense amount of guilt after that because he was trying to be a cool cop and didn't ask the guy for it or registration or anything. Just told him he can't be fishing there at that time and let him go on his way. Similar story but different ending. Rookie cop sees a truck pull out of a back road in the middle of the night and suspects he was poaching. Pulls him over and he has blood on him, so arrests the guy, and when they follow the tracks back into the woods they find a dead woman. Guy turns out to be a serial killer. I once walked over a homeless guy sleeping on the sidewalk in front of my apartment. It is a common occurrence, though usually they are polite enough to do it on the lawn instead. A few hours later I hear a siren and see them load him in a stretcher into the ambulance. So maybe that wasn't someone sleeping. The scariest thing I've seen at night is you not liking and subscribing. I mean, really?